The following podcast is an RMG Media production.
Hello, Renaissance podcast listeners. Sydney here, coming in to share about the 2024 Renaissance Women's Summit that is coming up on February 24th. It's 2/24/24. This is our fourth ever conference for women entrepreneurs. And if I'm being really honest, this is the one I'm the most excited for. I've been excited about all of them, of course, and I probably said that about all of them. But you guys, our keynote speaker, have you seen the announcement of who our keynote speaker is? I can't even contain my excitement. It is Alli Webb. If you don't know who Alli Webb is, let me just flip over the rock that you're living under. She's the founder of Dry Bar, and she just came out with a new book, The Messy Truth, which is phenomenal and fully aligns with who we are at the Renaissance Women's Summit, which is an organization that, yes, believes in empowering women, but the way that we do that is through sharing real life. We share real, authentic conversations about the struggles and the pain and the hard and all of the back stuff that isn't really talked about when it comes to entrepreneurship. So Alli Webb, she had it all until she didn't. When Dry Bar and its world-famous blowouts took off seemingly overnight, she found herself surrounded by celebrity clients like Zooey Deschanel, Jennifer Garner, Gwyneth Paltrow, Julia Roberts, and so many more. And she was named to multiple prestigious lists by Fast Company, Fortune, Marie Claire, and Inc. She published a New York Times bestselling book all before she turned 40. But it wasn't until her marriage fell apart, her 14-year-old son entered rehab, and she no longer found meaning in the widely successful business that she had built, that Alli realized she was spiraling into deep depression. She'd lost sight of what made her happy in favor of an aimless push to succeed above all. Something had to give. Piece by piece, Alli began to reinvent her personal and professional life with the goal of accepting her messy truth. She learned how to embrace the honest in lieu of the perfect and realized that most of life happens somewhere in the middle. Between the laughter and the tears, in the messy truth, she invites readers into her world as an entrepreneur, a mother, and a partner, examining with startling humor and wisdom the truths and fictions that we tell ourselves and others as we learn to embrace the mess of life. This is so major for the Nashville community to invite Alli. We are flying her into Nashville, and she has been so gracious and wants to meet every single woman attendee at the conference. She also is going to be doing a book signing. And guess what? If you are attending the summit, you are going to get a copy of her book, and she is going to sign it and meet you and take pictures with you after she gets off the stage as we close out the day. You can also use the code The Messy Truth for 20% off tickets to the summit. That works for our VIP package as well as our general admission package. So buckle up, Renaissance women. 2024 is the year of the Renaissance woman, and I couldn't be more excited and honored to welcome Alli into our Renaissance world. So you can get your tickets now and learn more about our amazing speaker lineup at www.therenaissancewomensummit.com. We'll see you guys there. Welcome to the Renaissance Podcast, a podcast for Renaissance women
and men
who want to create a modern-day renaissance in their life and business.
We interview some of the most successful entrepreneurs and share their unique stories.
Are you ready to create your renaissance? Well, we're rolling. It's so nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. Ashley and you both met recently.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Ashley texted me and was like, we have to have her on the show.
Thank
I
you.
was
Shout out Ashley.
shout out Ashley. She just knows and it's just
Yeah.
such a different conversation.
Yeah. This will
Yeah.
be a really fun conversation. I'm excited.
I am very excited. So Cortney, You Can Heal With Us.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant name.
It's such a good name.
I mean, spin on Mean Girls, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
So, and I just have
Thank you for getting that, by the way.
Yes.
I'm so millennial and
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
so Mean Girls is like, you know, the movie, right?
Yes.
Like, and I
Yes.
have, from a marketing standpoint, I have such an appreciation for a business name like that because I feel like it tells you right out of the gate who your customer is.
Exactly. I love you.
Who your client is.
You can tell you're a marketing expert, girl. Yes.
Well, okay. So take us back. I'm very interested in you. Like
Yeah.
how did you get into this? Because you're so young and it's like, it seems like you've been in business for decades and decades, but that can't be possible because look at you. But how did you get into this world? And I need to know about this world because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Loaded question. So we'll just jump right into that.
Yep.
So my background's actually in accounting. I'm a CPA.
Wow.
I worked in Big Four, and it was super competitive. And while I was there, I had really horrible anxiety that manifested itself as insomnia. And I wasn't sleeping, and I was in this high pressure job, right? Like, it was so demanding. You know, we were working 70-hour weeks and that was going on for years. And I'm looking at people around me like, how are y'all doing this? Right? Like, I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm not doing this well. And so I started going to all these sleep specialists and doctors and things. And, you know, they would put me on medications. None of it worked. It was so frustrating. And you just start to, the message you're telling yourself is like, something's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? Right? And so in that process, I met someone and went to dinner with, it was a guy, and he started to share his story with me about his childhood and just how his mom was an alcoholic and how he was raised by his dad. And he looked so normal. I was like, okay, first off, who talks about this? And like, who is normal and has that background? And it made me feel so safe for the first time in my life to actually share a little bit of my story. Because I thought, like, no one shares this stuff, you know? And so what was fascinating is that night I went home and I slept like a baby. And that got my attention because I was like, what? All I have to do is like share some of this stuff and I'm going to feel better. Like, this is interesting, right? And so I literally went to, I was at a new church at the time. I started inviting people to coffee and like just asking them about their story and telling them my story. And every time I would tell more of my story, I felt more free. And it was just because I had all of these secrets from my childhood that I had been trying to confine and keep to myself that I felt were so full of shame and all of these things. But as I shared, they would share. As I got free, they would get free. And I was like, there is something to this, right? And it really got my attention. And to the point where I was like, I don't think that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in life. Like, there's something more here. And so I quit my Big Four public accounting job with no plan. And I really felt like I was going to share my story. I thought that was like what I was supposed to do. And so I created this web series. At the time, YouTube was like all the rage or whatever. And I had this channel where I featured people's stories of overcoming adversity. I made no money, obviously. And it was really broad at first because I was like, I don't know what this is. And I just want to share more stories. And I shared my story for the first time about how my mom was a convicted felon and robbed a bunch of banks when I was 4 years old, and how I grew up in a domestic violence home, and how I, was verbally and mentally abused throughout my childhood, and all of this stuff you'd never know because I was this picture perfect, straight A, over high achieving, perfectionist person, summa cum laude, like all the things, right? And so nobody knew. And it really rocked my friend group to the core because they're like, what? We didn't know this stuff. And it was so liberating for me. It was also so hard because being seen was a really terrifying thing to me when I had grown up in that kind of environment, right? And so all that stuff, started to come out. But what was fascinating is in this web series I did, while it was really broad at first, I found myself subconsciously seeking out people who had stories like mine. And it gave me this desire to go after childhood trauma and go after the people who were like me, right? Yeah. And so through that, though, it opened the door for me to have some speaking opportunities. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to speak for the rest of my life. And it was fascinating. I spoke in colleges and like Purdue and Maryland and all this stuff with these mental health programs, but also high schools. And afterwards, I'm talking about hundreds of kids would line up to talk to me, share their story. It was like just fascinating how many people could relate when I had my whole life thought I'm the only one, you know? And so, so fast forward, what really happened is I got kind of obsessed with learning about childhood trauma, with learning about what the impact that has on us and our physiology, and not just childhood trauma, but trauma in general. And I really felt, I prayed, and in prayer one day, I really felt like God said, you are to learn everything that you can learn about childhood trauma, about the nervous system, about stress, about all of these things, because when I do what I'm going to do, you will not have time to learn. So heads down, do that. And so I did for years. And I felt like, is this ever going to come to be, you know? But at the same time, I was starting to speak more. And I kind of got a bigger speaker circuit under my belt and was actually getting paid. So that was awesome. And in the same thing, I feel like this is important, especially if you have some entrepreneur people listening. At that time, I also was a financial consultant. Just a contractor, really. I would do like 1099 work for corporations and things. And it allowed me to have this consistent income so I could grow whatever I needed to do over here, right? And what was awesome about it is I ended up getting a contract with this company. It was supposed to be for like 3 months and they kept me for like 5 years, but they let me do whatever I wanted to do. So they're like, speaking engagements are fine. Just get the work done. We don't care. And so I say that because I think it's important for people to hear, like, it's okay to have something else that's bringing you consistent income. Like, let's not overlook how important that was, because it allowed me to invest in my business in ways that most people can't, like get the training, get the education. And so as I was getting more education, I would teach like these kids, these students about their nervous systems, because trauma, what I didn't know and what all those doctors didn't tell me, it's not that it impacts our brain as much as it impacts our physiology and our nervous system. Because think about when you're caught off guard, or maybe most people have been in a close call of a car accident, right? And so afterwards, your heart is racing. Like, it's a physiological experience. And that's what trauma is. It's internal overwhelm to the point where you can't cope or process an event. And what that does in your physiology, it creates this dysregulation in your nervous system, to where the nervous system thinks, I'm still not safe. The event is still happening. And that's really what I was living out in my public accounting career. Like, I had all of this stuff that had happened in my past that was still unresolved. And the pressure and the added stress was just too much for my system. So I was in full-blown fight or flight survival mode for years, right? But as I was doing all this work, I was getting my own help. I was learning what modalities actually worked, and they were the somatic base, which is, body-based work, not talk therapy like most people think. And while I want to say too, make it clear that like it does affect your brain and your thoughts and those things, but it's actually the physiology of the nervous system that's running the show. 80% of the information exchange between your brain and body comes from your body to your brain. And so if you're only doing talk therapy or only working on mindset and changing your beliefs and all that, you're only working with 20% of the problem. Wow. And so you could have so much more relief if you worked with a body-based modality. And that's what I learned. And I just kept going to all these practitioners. Some worked, some didn't. And I spent a lot of money, wasted a lot of time. And ultimately, that's what I wanted to create You Can Heal With Us to be, is this one-stop shop for people where I teach you all of these modalities. And the ones that worked, we use them on people. We teach them the fundamental education that they need to understand. So before I got to You Can Heal With Us, what happened is I was speaking and I thought that was the direction I was going. I got a business coach type mentor, who was like, you're kind of doing this backwards. Like, I think you need to start with coaching first and then move into speaking, because then you really understand people. You understand your audience, you understand their pain points, you understand, like, you're going to be a much better speaker if you coach first. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know how to, so I started fumbling my way into that. And when I did, that was 2019. And I feel like it was divinely orchestrated, because then 2020 happened and my entire speaking tour was off. And so I just threw everything I had into coaching and got a ton of clients. I mean, everyone was at home, and my whole practice is on Zoom. So people had time to do it.
Right.
They weren't out spending money, so they could invest in themselves. And it was this everyone's trauma was coming to the surface because they were just sitting there. They couldn't survive the way that they always had, right? Which was all those coping mechanisms were off the table.
So true.
And so it was like
true.
the
2020
perfect,
was a woo.
It was a doozy.
Yeah. And when you talk about mental health, because it's exactly what you said. You've spent your whole life just going and like not dealing with it. And then 2020, you had to sit and deal with it. There's nothing to
look
do.
at it.
Couldn't ignore it.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, I feel like, Talkspace and all of these businesses just boomed.
Totally.
But that this is so different. This is somatic. This is the body, which I just think is fascinating. And these two girlies right here have struggled with insomnia for quite a while. And when I first found out that Ashley was struggling with me, I just felt like, oh my God, like we both have struggled with it. And I know we both have very different upbringings and stories and all of that, but I'm so interested in that piece and how you said at the beginning it was like an anxiety thing.
Yes.
What, like, gosh, so much to unpack.
Let me speak to that.
Let's speak to that.
Yeah. So anxiety is the main thing that most of our clients come to us for. And everyone experiences anxiety differently. Some people literally get hives. Some people, it's just ruminating thoughts. Some people have insomnia. Some people
bite their nails.
Bite their nails. Like, there's just so many different facets of it, but all of it is stemming from the sympathetic nervous system. Yeah. And you guys have probably heard of that as fight or flight, right? So let me just give you a little framework for your nervous system in the States, because I'm going to be educating you guys as we go here. Okay.
I love it.
So think of your nervous system like a ladder. And if you do that, at the top of your ladder is ventral. This is where you're thriving, you're motivated, you're at peace, you're regulated, you can experience calm there, but it's kind of a spectrum. So sometimes you're at peace and stillness and just feeling good. And then you might also have excitement there and be passionate there, right? This is where everyone wants to be all the time. But the problem is stressors are going to happen and our brilliant nervous system is going to come to our aid. And so what happens is a stressor happens or a stimuli happens or a perceived threat happens, and our nervous system goes, I'm going to help you out. It drops you down your ladder into sympathetic, which is that fight or flight response. And so you're going to experience this as higher energy, because what happens is your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, those stress hormones are going up. And really what it's trying to do is gear you up to take care of the threat, to take some sort of action, right? So when you're here, you have agency. You feel like I can do something, but I need to do it now. It's the sense of urgency. I can't sit still. But here in this, again, it's a spectrum, and you can have things like anxiety. You can have perfectionism here. You can have not procrastinate. You can have people pleasing here, appeasement. You can have controlling, fixing behaviors. OCD tendencies happen here a lot of times, but all the way over to defensiveness, being argumentative, being in full blown rage or mad, right? And all of those are an attempt to get rid of the perceived threat so that you can come back up your ladder to ventral. Okay. That's what your body is trying to do. That's in the perfect world. That's what happens is someone's being mean to you, and that's a perceived threat to you. And so you get mean right back and you put them in their place, and the threat's gone, and you move back up and have a wonderful day, right? In ventral. But what tends to happen most of the time is the stressor doesn't go away, or more stressors happen, and the stress and the burden keep coming. And so you start to move down your ladder even further into what's called dorsal. And dorsal is this place of withdrawal, isolation, shutdown. Most people would call it burnout. You could also experience it as just feeling numb, disconnected, disassociated, those types of things.
Yeah.
And really what's happening here is your nervous system's either depleted of energy or the threat is so big that it feels life-threatening. It feels like I can't do anything. I can't take action here. When you're here, you feel helpless and hopeless and stuck. Like, what can I actually do? There's either too much on your plate or everything's happening too fast for you to keep up, right? Or the threat feels so big that it's like, this is too overwhelming. It's too much, and I'm not going to be able to handle this on my own, right? And so you want to withdraw from people and move away and get smaller. Yeah. That's dorsal. Now, there's also freeze. And I feel like this is really important for entrepreneurs to hear, okay? So freeze is a blended state of sympathetic and dorsal. It's kind of equal parts. So it's where you're all revved up. I need to take action, but it's like a deer in headlights. Like you have your foot all the way on the gas, but you're pulling the e-brake at the same time. So gas of the sympathetic, but e-brake of dorsal. And what happens is you know what you need to do, but you cannot do it.
You're like frozen.
Yes,
you're like literally,
frozen.
Yeah. That's relatable.
Yeah. And so also with that, really confusion is heavy here.
Lack of clarity.
Feeling like, lack of clarity, feeling like you kind of are going back and forth on decisions, paralysis by analysis. Those types of things happen in freeze. And they are like, all entrepreneurs that I know feel that at some point. So now you got a name for it. It's really that freeze response.
Yeah.
And so that's the nervous system ladder. Okay. So if you're struggling with anxiety, all that really means is you're in sympathetic, your nervous system is perceiving threat, and it may not actually be a threat. So sometimes what happens is it is an actual threat. Like, let me say, sometimes it is an actual threat, but a lot of times it's stuff in our past.
Yeah.
And in our subconscious, and the subcortical brain is what that's called. So it's below consciousness. And the body basically says, we've seen this before. We know what it is and we know how to handle it. And we're going to do X because that's what you did in the past, right? And so that's what helped us in the past. So an example of this might be you need to – so I have a lot of clients that are like just getting started in their business journey maybe, and they really need to show up on their stories on social media. And it's like the thing they need to do to like pitch their business or whatever, and they cannot do it. And it's because it's the being seen aspect, like I talked about in the beginning, right? And the nervous system goes, oh, heck no, we are not going to be seen because the last time we got seen, what happened? It wasn't good, right?
Yeah.
And so they're like, I cannot do it. They know they need to do it. They cannot do it. And they cannot make their body do the thing. And that's because your nervous system, your survival patterns will always overdrive your willpower every time, because your body doesn't care how much you want to sell your business or pitch your business or how good of an idea you have. It cares about keeping you safe, and that's it. It doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It cares about your survival. And here's the other thing that we're up against is that our nervous systems have been around. They're ancient. They're not like your iPhone. They don't get updates.
Yeah.
They literally see a threat as a threat, a stressor as a stressor, a stimuli as a stimuli. So the same way that our ancestors were running from lions and tigers and bears, and they were real, actual threats. Our nervous system sees the passive-aggressive text from your friend or your boyfriend or your whatever. Your client. Or the email from your client or the bill that you don't know how you're going to pay. It sees all of that the same level it's seeing a lion, a tiger, and a bear.
Oh, I mean, that just makes so much sense. Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense why high performers and just people in that space are struggling the most because of 100%. Just what we have coming at us all the time. So this is so different than talk therapy.
100%.
Like night and day. Not that we don't love that.
Yeah, it's
not
great.
That we don't need it.
And it was so helpful in my journey as well. But
love that.
So what you need to know about that is that there's 3 phases of healing, really. And the first phase is stabilization. So that's like if you literally can't function, you really do need a mental health practitioner, a talk therapist to kind of get you back to baseline, right? That's not my wheelhouse. I leave that for them. But where the next step happens is when you are at baseline, but you maybe are not where you know you could be. And like you can function in your day to day, but you just feel stuck in a lot of areas. Okay, so this is the phase 2 of healing, and we call it a top-down approach. So it is using that cognitive 20% of your brain to take directed action steps, to use practical tools. This is also where like psychoeducation would come into play, and you do need your conscious brain to be on board with what you're gonna do subconsciously. So really phase 2 is all about top-down approach. And we do this as part of You Can Heal With Us. We do an 8-week class that's called Healing Foundations class. And we teach you everything you need to know, like to actually start introducing safety to your system again, and to give you practical action steps to take to bring yourself into regulation when you're noticing like, I'm spinning right now, or everything feels chaotic, or I'm in shutdown, or whatever, right? So we do that. But then the next phase, the last phase of healing, is really the integration and embodiment piece. And this is the somatic reprocessing. So this is where we are taking you into your body. We're, going through, really, we start with the present. We don't ever go digging into the past. We're like, your body is remembering it, even if you don't explicitly remember it, because you have that symptom or you have that behavior, right? So we start with that, and we start to notice like what is happening in your physiology as you talk about this client email, right? Like what's happening, because your body's remembering something. And so we work with them somatically in your physiology. Like I care more about what's happening in your body, what emotion you're feeling, or what images or flashbacks or memories are happening for you as you're telling me this story, than I care about the story itself. Not that I deeply care about your story, but I'm saying it's more about, whoa, what's happening there? I'm seeing you like get really excited right now, or get very activated, right? Like let's pause, let's notice. And that's very different from talk therapy because it's trauma informed. So it's taking into account how this content, is what we call it, the story, is creating a reaction in your body. And we're going to pause you, and we're not going to make you go into it more, because just talking about it makes your body feel, your body doesn't know the difference between time and space. And so when you're talking about it, it actually relives it. It puts you right back in there, and it can really easily create re-traumatization. So that's a big no-no for us. We really try to keep you out of that. Man, I've rambled. I don't know.
No. This is so fascinating to me.
It's very different.
It's so fascinating that you don't go in the story. Because I feel like that can be very opposite from like other forms of therapy like EMDR that take you really back into the story. And you're right. It can, if it's not done well, it can reactivate the trauma and reactivate the, like it's
the
just
triggering.
The triggers. And so I love that you don't go in the story, and that you focus on the present.
Yes.
Because I feel like so much in therapy is like talking about the past and what happened in your past. And it's like, it's what you need to focus on is the present, because you can't go back and change the past. You can't go back and change anything. It is what it is. Can you talk a little bit more about that on like how you focus on the present?
Yeah. So first off, I'll say, we start in the present. It often brings us back to the past. So I'm not going to tell you that you're never going to talk about your past with me. You probably are. It's different in that we are, the big thing is introducing resources. So I like to, I guess, in somatic experiencing, which is what I'm trained in, I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner. In that work, we find resources and we find trauma in stories, essentially. And what happens is most of the time in a traumatic event, you have both, but you have completely disregarded the resources that were there. And that's to no fault of your own. It's how we're biologically wired, is to see the threat and to highlight the threat. And so our nerve systems want to go into what we call the trauma vortex. And it's like, think about it like a massive tornado, right? And that's where the client wants to go, to like the heat of the moment of that. And I'm actually trying to keep them out of the heat of the moment of that. I'm like, okay, let's back way up, like let's talk about a car accident. Like, let's jump ahead to the point when did you know you were safe? When did you know you were going to live? Right? It's like, let me jump you to the resource so your body can see it's over. It's not happening, right? And what that does is it creates some space from you with the memory, and it allows you to see it more third party and like a bird's eye view than actually being consumed by it. So we're all about witnessing, not being consumed.
Mm-hmm.
So as if you could have, like we try to create space and things that help you to process it, because you do have to, in order to resolve the trauma. I mean, you don't have to go back into it. There are many of my clients that we've resolved the trauma without ever getting the memory. We have no idea what it is, because a lot of it's pre-verbal. Like it happened before you could even talk. Oh, yeah. In utero, often too. Yeah. So it's like, it's fascinating. It will carry, your body remembers, your body keeps a score, right? That's the famous book. But it's true in that you don't actually need the original memory. But for a lot of my clients, like, to bring resolution, they know the memory. And what I help them do is bring in resource to the point where they can resolve, and they can, in a what we call titrated way. So little bit by little bit, think of like a scientist in a lab with a beaker. They're like dropping just one drop at a time, because if they drop the whole thing at a time, it'll explode, right? So we just introduce a little bit of the trauma at a time, and we're hanging out mostly in resource, if that makes sense. It's something you have to experience more than I can explain it. But the whole point is to keep you resourced so that you're not overcome by the trauma. Because when we resolve it, you're going to see it in a way that's just so different than the original thing. And it's like, I ask people a lot of times, when we start with an experience, like, where are you on a level of activation if you think about that memory on a scale of 1 to 10? And like, they're like, I'm at a 12. Like, it's the most extreme thing to me. And by the time we're done with this, they're at a 3, maybe, or a 4. And even if they're at an 8, if they're at a 12 before, I'm like, great, and we're not done with it, but we've made progress. And so, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does.
What?
You go ahead.
I was just going to probably ask maybe the same question, but like, what are some things that we can do if our listeners are listening and they know they have anxiety, they know that they're probably they need this. Like, because I've heard, it's like meditation. It's all a lot of like you said earlier, the mental, the mindful, those practices, but it's not that. So how do we support our nervous systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. Don't do meditation yet. Anyways,
don't start there.
Don't start there. For most of my clients that have experienced trauma, that's the worst thing you can do is be alone with your thoughts, honestly.
And that's the worst thing I can do is ever be alone with my thoughts.
That sounds like the worst idea for most of the people that I work with. And I want to normalize that and say it makes sense. Like, it's okay that, because your body has done everything to keep you from being alone with your thoughts for years. So like, don't start there. Start with your body, which is what you're saying. So there is a lot you can do, and it totally depends on where you are on your ladder. So when you're in sympathetic, you're high energy. So just ask yourself, what would I do if I have too much energy right now? What's something that I could do? I mean, it can literally be going for a walk, obviously, going for a run, doing a workout class, those types of things. One of my favorite tools is really simple, and it's I call it the tense and release. So literally, we can do it right now. Like, it's just tense every muscle in your body, and you're just, I don't know if the camera can even tell, but I'm shaking because I'm tensing so hard. And then you're just going to slowly, I'm talking about slow motion, start to release the tension.
Yeah.
And you're going to come out of it so slow. Just rest, but stay in the rest longer than you stayed in the tension. And that's important because it starts to show your nervous system you're not in a stressful situation right now. You're actually okay to rest. You're okay to slow down. So that's like one example of something that you can do. We give over like 100 tools. Yeah. So like, because everyone's nervous system is different. Right. Ashley might be sitting here right now going, that made me amped up.
Stressed.
Yeah. And so and that's normal too. Right. Yeah. And so, it's important to know what works for you. So think about like, what feels good to me? What do I like? And think about like, places and people and things. Right. So like, who are people that make me feel safe? Mm-hmm. Is that someone I could call? Is that someone I could spend some more time with, right? But also notice, who makes me feel unsafe?
Yeah.
You know who those people are too, and you need to have boundaries around those people, like really, really big boundaries, because your body is seeing them as a tiger. And so, but where do I feel safe? Do I feel safest at home? Do I not feel safe at home because my roommate is mad at me all the time or she's dysregulated, right? Like, take an inventory of what feels safe. We call those cues of safety or cues of danger, right? Like take an inventory of the people and the places and the things that make you feel safe or not. But I would really, if you are an anxious person, one of the best things you can do is get the energy out. Mm-hmm. However that looks for you, you could push a wall with everything that you have, right? You could, do jumping jacks. I literally sometimes get off a call with a client and we'll stand right next to my desk and do squats because I'm like, whoa, that was a lot of energy, right? Yeah. And so it's creative kind of, and it's trial and error. And we have more kind of like the tense and release that are more like practical based things that I would more so need to like demonstrate and do things. But really what you want to do is get to the root of why you're dysregulated, why you're going there so chronically. And you probably think it's because your to-do list is crazy, but I guarantee you there's something else there. And that's actually the goal, because if you're just using tools all the time, that's really no different than any other coping strategy that you would have. Now they're necessary, and I think everyone should have them because I don't want you, it's a healthier choice than doing something else. Yeah. But actually you can resolve whatever is creating the dysregulation in your nervous system. And then you don't have to show up in life that way. Like it actually can be healed. You don't have to live with it for the rest of your life. And that's what you really need to hear, because I thought this was a life sentence. I thought I will not sleep ever again. Like and that's miserable.
Miserable.
It's awful. There's nothing worse than that.
Yeah.
And so y'all need to hear that. Like everyone needs to hear that. Like you can heal this. Yeah. And we have tools and things to help you. And, it is powerful and it is transformative work, and you'll never look back.
Yeah. And I think it's like listening to your gut too, of like, I'm not sleeping or I have anxiety. It's like, you've got to know. There's, I just feel like, especially as women, I feel like we know deep down. And I feel like for me, for the longest time, I thought maybe it's hormonal. Yeah. Yeah. And, I've just did a lot of resources and took progesterone and, did things to support that. Totally. And I think that probably healed a whole other set of problems.
Absolutely.
But I do think that the sleep thing it's something, and, it's all the connected.
Yeah. And so I love that you just brought that up, because I don't want people to leave this and go, I have unresolved trauma. Like maybe you don't. Like there could be there's so much stuff that can create dysregulation in your nervous system. Right. But I don't know a soul that doesn't have some level of dysregulation that's due to their past. And the other thing is like, how are we defining trauma? Like, what you need to know is it's not these like massive, like my story
stuff. Like, oh my God.
That's intense. And I don't usually share that stuff. Right. Why? because no one can relate to it, because it's extreme. But most of my clients have they just have these more subtle things that were normal, but actually created a lot of, or they were common, maybe not normal. And they created a lot of inner stress and internalizing that made you think that something was wrong with you or whatever, right? Yeah. So it's more subtle things, and it has everything to do with your physiology and how you handled that event. And also like thinking about, a lot of times siblings will have different perspective of their like childhood or something, and that's because maybe when some of the more stressful seasons for your parents were, the older sibling was at a different developmental stage than the younger, parents play favorites, guys. Like there's so many layers to it. So if you've been invalidated about those experiences, I want you to know that no matter how you felt about it, it's valid. Yeah. And so whoever's dismissed your experience, your pain is valid, and it needs to be validated in order for it to be healed. And so that's kind of the first step, but
do you think that it's generational that right now it feels like there's so many conversations and so many beautiful people like you that are doing this work that has needed to have been done for decades? And do you feel like it's like a new thing? Because it's hard to make these blanket statements, but I feel like our parents we're not having these conversations.
No. Totally.
And we're not getting help and we're not seeking it, but needed it. And, you know, I mean, I think about my parents and both of them have childhood trauma that we've talked about. And I'm like, but they weren't having these open conversations, you know? And it's like, why?
Gosh, I have so much compassion for our parents' generation and the generations before them because mental health wasn't even a thing back then, right? Like these things were not discussed. About. And that was the norm, was to sweep it under the rug and to keep it within your four walls. And that was one of our generational traumas in my family, is like, you know, our thing was that's family business. You don't discuss it with other people, right?
Yeah.
And so I mean, I have so much compassion because I truly believe that all parents do the best that they can, given the tools that they have, given their own trauma, given what the state of their own nervous system. And also the trauma research is really recent. I mean, so much so that like a lot of the like colleges and things like graduate programs they just are recently starting to teach trauma the way that like the latest science tells us it is. And that's why, you know, so many of these therapists and things are not trauma informed. It's not their fault. But so I say all that to say it's like, it's really about what was the norm back then.
Yeah.
And what our parents endured. And the thing is you can't even blame your parents because you'd have to blame their parents and then their parents. And then, I mean, it goes all the way back to like Adam and Eve. Like it's just been around forever, right? And so if you want to do something different though, you really do have to be conscious and aware of how your past is showing up in your present and what beliefs and things that you have carried, because everyone as a parent doesn't know what they're doing. They just know what was done to them. And sometimes they use that as their mark and say, I don't want to do what was done to me. And they go to the opposite end of the spectrum, which can be equally as bad. And like, it's more permissive instead of authoritarian, you know, where authoritarian parenting is like, you know, do as I say, I'm the adult. It's this unequalized power play, right? But so then I know for me, like I had one caregiver that was that extreme and that was so damaging to me that it was like, I want to go the other way. But I had one parent that was that way and it was just as bad if you're just like, I can't help you. You like help yourself, like you do it or whatever, because they think it's like too much power on the child where it's like neglect comes into play. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And being a new mom and she's a new niece, has a new niece and a new auntie. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about like, from a parent standpoint, we know our kids are going to go through something, right? Like we know they're going to, hopefully it's not, you know, trauma from us or whatever, but there's just going to be shit, right? Like there's just going to be life shit. Are there things we can teach them while they're little that help them kind of, like, is that kind of within your wheelhouse to talk about?
Totally. Yeah. This is like the majority of our clients are parents. I mean, there's just a lot of them. And what I would say
not
is
taught by our parents. You know what I mean? So it's like, what can we do?
Yeah. And so I can relate. I have a 13-month-old. So, and I know yours is around that age, right?
He's 18 months. Yeah.
And so what I would say is the first thing you want to do is treat your child with respect. And that means respecting their emotions and respecting that their behavior is communication. Yeah. And really holding space for their emotions. And like, that will be really hard for you if no one's held space for yours.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people run up against this because they're like, what was taught to you and how you were treated was like, go to your room if you're going to cry, or, you know,
stop being a baby.
Exactly.
And being dramatic.
Yeah.
Stop being dramatic.
Yeah. But like it actually, to hold space for the child emotion and normalize what they're doing helps them to trust themselves and what they're feeling, helps them to trust you. It creates a safe environment for them to know that people have emotions. And that way, when they grow up and get older, that's what's normal to them and familiar, and not someone who's belittling, dismissing, telling them they're wrong or bad because they have. Yeah. And so if we want our kids to attract healthy individuals in their friendships or their romantic partners or whatever, we have to make sure that we are giving them that as well. And we have to hold space for these big emotions and normalize them. Because if you don't, the real problem is that they learn that their emotions are wrong, that they're bad, that something's wrong with them. And so you as a parent too, like, having tools to hold space for your own emotions and not dismissing your own emotions and showing your kid that it's normal to have them, right? Like all of that is really important work. And it seems probably too simple, but it actually is like the biggest change when I work with most of my clients. Yeah. It's like no one ever made it okay for them to cry. No one ever, there was just so much of a be seen and not heard and like all of those things. And so what they learn is to disconnect from their bodies because their body's driving the emotion. Yeah. You actually get sensation first and then you have emotion that follows typically. And so they start to disconnect and they are like, oh, I feel this, but I guess it's wrong because mommy says that, I shouldn't be crying or whatever it is, right? Or I shouldn't be mad or all these things. And like, actually they're human. Like they should have the whole spectrum of emotion. And so normalizing all of that stuff and making it okay and not, timeouts basically tells them they're not worthy of your connection when they're misbehaving, right? And that is so hard when kids come out of the womb knowing they need connection to survive. And for you to deny that is a massive rupture to their internal system. And that's where so much of our patterning comes from. It's like, what do I need to do to get my need met? What do I need to do to make sure that I maintain connection with my parents? Well, that means I probably need to stuff my authenticity. I need to, I need to
makes you a robot, basically.
Yeah. And so all these things that you guys are struggling with now, maybe not you two, but like the people pleasing and not setting boundaries. It's all about, you became a people pleaser because you were first a parent pleaser. And like all of us are guilty of that.
Speaking to my soul.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I don't even blame you for that because I think about, little Sydney or little Ashley and like you just wanted to have connection with your parents. You didn't want them to be mad at you. Mm-hmm. And so you did whatever you had to do to make sure. Yeah. So that could be keeping up with the house and doing your chores or getting good grades, or it could be, any number of things. And some people, they try so hard to please initially. Everyone tries that first. It's like, this is attachment science we're getting into, but like they try the pleasing first. And if that doesn't work, then they might go the opposite in the spectrum and just withdraw and say, you know what, nothing I could do is going to work. So like my parent doesn't love me and I just need to learn how to figure this out myself. I need to disconnect. I need to not have needs. I need to be fiercely independent.
And then it goes on and on and on. Yeah. Okay. And that leads perfectly into my next point question for you about just, going through these not healed, cycles and running a business, right? Yeah. So like speak on when we're not healed and we're running a business, we're running teams and we're leaders and like we still have all of this work. Maybe we're people pleasing and like just all the horrible shit that happens when you haven't healed yourself and you're not doing the work.
Yeah. Man, first off, I have so much respect for every single one of you that have a side hustle, have a business, are trying to be a leader in any capacity and have not done this work because it is hard because by definition, there is so much risk in entrepreneurship. There's so much risk in leadership of having those wounds that you're carrying be reenacted. Because when you own a business, people are going to reject you. Like they're not going to want your service. They're not going to want your product. So that's rejection wounds again, abandonment wounds when your employees go to some other business, right? Like neglect wounds when no one's showing up and you make the ask, right? And like all of it is just getting injured all over again. Like it's rewounding, right? And just by definition, entrepreneurship, there's uncertainty, there's volatility. Your nervous system hates that. It wants stable, secure, So I have so much respect for the way that people are trying to white knuckle it, right? And I just want to say, I see you and you're not broken and nothing's wrong with you. If you are reacting in ways that you can't make sense of, you're, maybe getting an attitude with your, employee or whatever, like, I just have so much respect. So first, I think the first step is normalizing all of that. And two, recognizing that the nervous system is running the show 80% of the time, right? So like what you need to be aware of is that there's tigers inside and outside of your business. So let's talk about them outside first. So you have a business the tigers outside, I'm talking about the stressors outside. So that could be like your kid getting sick, your parent like having a chronic illness and you have to be the caregiver, right? It could be so many different things about what's happening in your external environment, but it totally affects your work because you're a human and your nervous system carries that with you wherever you go. And so what tends to happen is you prioritize that instead of your business, right? And you have to sometimes, but recognize them for what they are. They're tigers. Like I think I tell people all the time, when you got kids, you've got little mini cute saber-toothed tigers chasing you all the time, right? It's an absolute thing. And so normalizing that all of those things can keep you from your nervous system prioritizes threats. And so those are truly like life-threatening things for your nervous system. Like if your kid is sick or your kid is not doing well or your parent's not doing well or you yourself have something like illness-wise or any of those things, like those are such important relationships for your survival that your nervous system is going to prioritize that. And so don't beat yourself up for how that's affecting your work, but notice that it's affecting your work instead of like own that that's affecting your work. How can you get some support in that, right? And setting boundaries. Maybe your mother-in-law is a doozy, right? And like maybe you need some boundaries there. Like if you can't get rid of the threat, that the tiger that's outside of your business, can you put some boundaries around it? And can you introduce more safety to kind of guard yourself from some of those external stressors? So that's outside of your business tigers. But inside your business tigers, like what is it that you're getting stuck in around your business? So is it showing up? I use showing up on stories because I just have so many clients that do that. That like it's not safe to be seen thing, right? But also like if every time when you were younger, you had a need and it was dismissed, then you're not likely to think that when you make an ask of someone like, oh my gosh, I've got to tell my prices to somebody. Like that's going to feel so unsafe to your nervous system if you have a past history that's unresolved of all these instances where you're bid for connection or money. Yeah. So this is so connected to money.
Totally.
Yeah. And so there's lots that can come up around that too. And just know it's all your nervous system and all that stuff can be worked out and fleshed out and like healed. Honestly, truly, it's crazy.
Yeah. And you probably can't do it alone.
Yeah. You do need a third party practitioner to help that's going to be objective and has the tools and like you need all of that.
Seen it all. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But like I want to just say like all of these things. The other thing that is really important to think about is, if you have these goals and you're not doing it, it's not because you don't want it bad enough. There's like all those sayings of if it's important to you, you'll find a way. If it's not important, you'll make an excuse or something like that. That's not true.
Right.
It's literally that if you're not doing it, if you're not achieving the goal, it's because at some level it feels unsafe to your nervous system. That's all it is. And so when you can figure that out, there's so much you can do about it. But here's the thing. Success is terrifying to your nervous system for a lot of people because of what it represents. Maybe it represents more money and you don't trust yourself with money. And so at a subconscious level, that might be your truth, but like your subconscious is what's running the show there.
It's going to hold you back.
Yeah. And so it's like people would call it self-sabotaging. I call it self-protection. It's that's what it is. But like also, does success mean more responsibilities on your plate? Like if your nervous system's already burdened by too much, it's like, I don't want to do that because that is just another freaking thing that feels like it's going to put me over the edge, right? Yeah. Your nervous system only has so much capacity.
That protection,
or maybe it's like, if I get this promotion, now I'm going to be a manager of all these people and people freak me out. Like I have all this history of like people doing me wrong or I don't trust myself to be a leader. Like all of this is because of your past crap. Like you got to resolve it. And so starting to see where you're stuck and frozen or like where you're not taking action, but you should be, or where you know what you need to do, but you're not doing it. Yeah. Like get honest with yourself, and there's help for that. Like you need to hear me. Like that doesn't mean you can't get to that promotion. That doesn't mean you can't have that business. It means we got to resolve what the nervous system is still thinking is a threat that's not,
What do you see
like the positive outcome from this work to high performers and entrepreneurs? Like, what do you see them do? Like just, do they have just that mental freedom and they're able to just get through these hurdles and, you know, send the big proposals and all of that because nothing's holding them back anymore?
Yeah.
That protection.
It's literally so much fruit. And everyone's would be different, right? But like, I see them not getting in their own way anymore. And it is like game changing. And what happens is we give them the tools to really know what to do when it's happening. And instead of overriding your system, because what the tendency is for, you know, those big people who stay in hustle, which is really the sympathetic, who are driven and sympathetic and live their life there. These are people who have learned to white knuckle and dismiss their experiences and their pain to just get through it. They're like, I mean, it doesn't matter. I got to keep going. Right. And like, my clients stop doing that because actually it's a recipe for burnout, because all you're doing is not acknowledging this stressor. And so you might start in this place where you can handle it for a while, but eventually you are going to deplete yourself. You really want to be operating your business from ventral, from your authentic self, outside of self-protection, which means the hustle energy ain't it, to be honest. And so you can get there. And that's how I like to show up in my business. Now, I'm not perfect at it, but it's like I know when I'm not doing it. And some seasons it's necessary. Like you guys are getting the summits coming up, right? Like
we're in fight or flight,
you gotta get through it. And that's just part of it. And listen, give your nervous system some appreciation for that. Like, oh, I see you trying to show up. Yeah, like thank you for just like letting me go on 6 hours of sleep last night or 3 hours or whatever. Like, like, but knowing when you're snapping or you're reactive or you're defensive or whatever's happening, right? Like, oh, I know why that's happening. And this is not, I'm not, you know, a horrible leader. I'm not all the stories you start telling yourself, like noticing, oh, no. This is literally just survival. And I see you and we just got to get through this finish line, right? And then like, I'm going to put some steps in place to not have to live in this. Like that's the problem. You just don't want your whole business built on this, like this hustle grind is what we're doing all the time, because it's a recipe for your team burning out. It's a recipe for them ending up in dorsal and not being productive at all, not being able to tap into creativity, because creativity happens in ventral, right? And like, that's where you need your team. Yeah. And so it's like, what can you do to put some parameters in place to where you guys are not operating out of sympathetic all the time? It's so necessary to take an inventory of that. And part of that is really getting to the root of what drives a sympathetic, which is actually more than your to-do list. Please hear me.
Yes. Oh, preach on all of that. Yeah. That's so important. And I love that because we're all doing it and it's so easy to get caught up in that rat race, but it's like, where's the longevity in all of this?
Totally.
Because it's not a long-term strategy, right?
Sustainability is the name of the game.
And the name of the game with business. Yeah. I'm curious about you because you briefly touched on your childhood trauma, which we don't have to go there, but I mean, dang, sister. Yeah. And you have a 13-month-old and you're running a business and you're killing it. Like, what do you do for you? Like, how do you support yourself? What is your kind of like nervous system self-care routine?
Man, it looks so much different on the other side of having a baby. Wow, does it? Okay.
I know, like self-care is just, it's a whole different thing. You know, self-care is going to the bathroom alone. You know, it's like what, you know, it's.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so on the other side of having a baby, so much has changed. So we don't have support here, like any sort of family. So our help is we have a sitter and she is my saving grace, you know?
She's your angel.
So like, hear me, you're going to need third-party support. Like, whether you have a kid or not, like, you cannot do it all. And delegation, before I got pregnant, that was the name of my game. It's like, what can I delegate? I found some virtual assistants, which if y'all aren't about the VA game, you better get on it because it's the best. But
I'll talk to you about that off air.
Okay, I got some recommendations too if y'all need them. But you know, getting some support in that way. So what it looks like for me now is having her support, scheduling my week where I work 2 full days and then I work 2 half days and then I take 1 full day off in the week.
Love that.
it's not great for me financially, but
mentally, emotionally, physically.
That's more important to me because I know that for me to show up, what's priority number one for me is me showing up well for my daughter. Yeah. And this work is heavy and it's deep and it's hard and it's really stressful on my system. Yeah. And so I told myself, if I'm going to have a baby, the max number of clients I'm going to take a week is 8. And that's like
a lot.
It's like a joke to me in the past. Like it's like
pre-you was a lot.
But like now it's like, no, that is, and that's my
capacity.
End game. I just know that. And I'm not going to jeopardize the type of person that I get to show up and be for her just for the name of like having my business be this thriving thing that at one point that was what I cared about, right? Yeah. Like I was like, I want to see people getting freedom. I want to see people healed. And now I'm just like, this may not be a year of growth. And I'm okay with that, right? Mm-hmm. Like she's going to one day be in school and doing whatever. I'm okay if we are in a season of sustainability and not this massive growth, right? So being real with myself about that. But then also like carving out time for me in that, like when I have a sitter, like having, that all the hours that she's there in the beginning, I was like, every single hour has to be work because I don't ever get to work and this business is going to crash and burn. But that was survival talking. That was not authentic me, right? The business is going to be fine. Like we serve our clients so well that they're always going to be knocking at our doors and sending us referrals. Like we don't have to go chase them down. And so I tried to do a really good job of that before I got pregnant so that, in this season, it doesn't have to be this grind. But I mean, so taking some time for myself in that period is just really important to use some tools, do the things that keep me in ventral. So going for walks, for me, education's really important. I love to learn new things. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm not regularly being in trainings and those types of things, I honestly don't stay in ventral that long. I need that. But what is it for you, right? Like some people know they need to make sure they make their bed every day. Like that might be a weird thing. They need to make sure that they're going to the workout classes. Like what is it that keeps you in ventral? What are the things that really feel good to you? Yeah. Make sure they're on your schedule, carve them in your schedule. And the other thing I tell my clients all the time is put reminders on your phone to do regulation tools. And for you, that might be like it's a beautiful day out, like walking your building, right?
Yeah,
like
it doesn't get back into that.
Yeah, like just like carving it into your day and making
time. You're worth it. And again, it's the long game. It's the longevity. It's like if you do carve those things into your day, you're going to get that dopamine, you're going to get that endorphin rush. And it's like what your body needs that. And it's like the reward for the work. My God.
Yes. Yeah. You deserve it.
You deserve it. Yeah. I love that. And I love that you take that day too. I think that's really awesome. And I think that that's why we start businesses. Yeah. So that we can do it, but we so often are like,
totally.
I have to get all of it in, and I have to make this, and it's like, life is not. It's not about that. It's like, if you want to have a year of like, well, we're not 300% in growth, like, but you had a good year and you were with your family, like that's freaking awesome, and that's currency also.
Totally, it's priceless.
You're amazing. I think you're an angel on this planet. I think that the work that you're doing is so important. I think that it is brilliant. I think it needs to be talked about more. I'm so honored and I'm so grateful that Ashley brought you here. And that
thank you, Sarah Patton.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Shout out, Sarah.
Do you want to ask her our leading question that we didn't add to the prep sheet?
End every podcast with, what is your definition of a Renaissance woman?
I think it's someone who is taking ownership of their life, taking responsibility for their part in it. Like, instead of blaming others, taking like initiative, ownership, responsibility. I think it's someone who prioritizes ventral, now that y'all know the word.
Yes. We're going to prioritize that.
And who just takes others with them. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important piece, right? It's not somebody who wants to like just have it all for themselves, but it's like locking arms with the right people, the right team, and like, like for me, it's been all about going back and getting people and bringing them to freedom too. You know, like you don't need to just have it for yourself. It's like, how can I give back? Which I know you do. Like I hear, you're involved in Vandy and being a mentor there and all of that. Like you guys are doing that already, but like it's important. It's an important piece of it.
It is. It's like you can heal with us.
Yeah.
Let's like all heal together.
Yes.
Let's this is that chain reaction. Like we're all healing and then let's pass those learnings down
exactly
to our sisters because that's just, it's a thing that's not talked about and it needs to be in more conversation and we're all on our own mental journey.
Yep.
And it is a journey.
It is.
Up here
and
in here.
All over. You guys are learning. It's the brain and the body are not separate, guys. We like to think so, but they're
totally do.
The same.
But I think that's so
communicating.
So interesting. And I could literally talk to you all day. Okay, well, where can everyone get in touch with you? Because I feel like a lot of our listeners are going to be knocking at your door.
Yeah. So come find me on Instagram. You guys are going to have show notes that say like all this stuff, right? Because you'll probably butcher my name. I don't have a you and Cortney, Cortney Lantigua, but
Cortney.
Yeah. And then our team page is You Can Heal With Us on Instagram. Or you can go to youcanhealwithus.com and see all of our programs and offerings.
Amazing.
And so that's the name. That's the game there. Like, come find me on Instagram. I have so much great psychoeducation on there.
You do.
Give tools and things like that. I show up in stories to teach you things. So like, come follow along. And
that's amazing.
If it feels right, join us,
It's amazing. I have so many mom friends, I feel like too, that that's a whole other thing. I know we just skimmed the surface of the mom and the postpartum and all of that.
Girl.
We could go there.
Yep.
But
maybe we'll do another podcast. I'll just invite myself back.
We might need to do that because there's so much nuance to what you do and talk about. So Cortney, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is amazing. And you guys definitely check her out. You Can Heal With Us on Instagram. We will be linking everything in the show notes and we will see you next time.